Welcome to the House of Truth. This week we're taking a little break from our our series we began on Judges last week, kind of looking at the transition period. We talked about Caleb, and of course how one of the great example of faithfulness he was. One of the greatest examples in the Bible. His entire life never wavered of what God told him to do. Did not even let old age prevent him, and carried out the will of God, not just to get what God promised him, but to bring about what God promised others as well. Well, this week we're switching gears a little bit. Here in America, it's about to be St. Patrick's Day. Not Irish or nothing like that, but there is something about the Celts that's different. That, should we say, makes them stand out from other groups. And we're going to explain that today and why it is, and how God, Yahweh, Yahuwah, however you like, is the one behind it. He, because what it is there's this Celtic expansion that culminated in Celts being all over the world, colonizing and creating new countries, people of Celtic ancestry, I should say. And we're going to look at why that is, and what God's purpose in this was, and how it's His hand that did it, and how He prepared for this expansion, how He prepared the Celtic, I should say, Celtic people and those and those tied to them for this, long before it ever happened. So today we're going to talk about the Celtic expansion, and we're going to begin in Genesis, Bereshit, the book of beginnings, in chapter 9, verses 18 through 20 through 19. And the son of Noah that went forth the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the three sons of Noah, and by them the whole earth was overspread. Okay, so these sons of Noah came out of the ark, and the whole earth's overspread by these. All right, everyone's a descendant through their father's line of one of these three people. And you may have through your mother's line perhaps a different from her father a different line. And so if you go back two generations to the grandparents, you may have all three in the mix, but they're all there. And notice that Ham is mentioned as being the father of Canaan. Canaan, that people that we've been reading about, that God said to drive out of the land because of their wickedness. And make sure the narrative, make sure to point this out that Ham's connected. So they're going to be overspread everywhere on earth. There's people, every inhabitable place. There's people inhabiting today. And this, it started with these three sons coming off the ark with Noah. Now, as we move down Genesis 9, verse 20 to 23, we get some more insight into these three sons and really what they've done, what they're about to do. That's going to shape all. It's going to shape all of history for the human race. And here's what we read: And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the neck of his father and told his two brethren without. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon their shoulders and went backwards and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces went backwards. And they saw at their father's nakedness. Okay, now notice again it mentions that Ham, the father of Canaan, again. Okay, and he saw the nakedness of his father. Noah had gotten drunk. Sadly, he got drunk, and perhaps his why, yeah, it was horrible. Here, all those people scream and everything, and he planted a vineyard. He drank too much, got drunk, and Ham saw, looked at one of his tent, perhaps to check on him, and he was, and saw his nakedness, and instead of just closing the tent or something, he's basically mocking his father and wants his two brothers, hey, take a look, Dad's drunk, whatever. But these two do the exact opposite. They take a garment between them. They walk backwards so they don't see his nakedness. and they get to a certain point where they absolutely walked back, and he's between them. They can see his feet, and they kind of let the thing drop over him to cover him up. So they treat him with honor and not, and not with perhaps dishonor as Ham had done. But Canaan's is the root of the problem. We'll talk about that perhaps in a minute here. So Noah, when he gets up, he finds this out, and the word God speaking through him, and the word of God. When he talks about like these people like Jacob, he'll talk over the destiny of their descendants. They're not just speaking mere words, okay? And let's notice this. Well, I'm going to back up one second. Let me explain who these players are, because you got to know who the players are, as I've said before, if you can really understand the Bible. Ham, notice father of Canaan. His name means hot, and and his descendants were told, we're told where they went: Africa, Egypt, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Asia, particularly the Canaanites, over all the way over to the Euphrates River and down, down to Babylon in southern Iraq, kind of along the Great Crescent there, as it were. That was their territory. In fact, in Arabia today, this day, there's people with very dark skin. They call them Black Arabs, who are descendants of these. So they had part of Asia and and in Africa. And remember, Ethiopia today is named from the Greek word Ethiopia, which means sun scorched, but the Hebrew word is kush, literally means black. Okay, so there's really no doubt about who Ham is, and in fact, it's called the Afro-Asian Plate, that area where they at geologically, and historically it had African animals on it as well. So. So it's a little bit of Africa in Asia, as it were. Well, let me continue on here in Genesis 9, verse 27, 9:27. And this is Noah's, what he's saying prophetically about them. God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be a servant. You notice Canaan's particularly mentioned out. We saw it's what Ham did to him. Well, Canaan had did something worse, okay? And the expression is used elsewhere in the Bible where it talks about Canaan, of someone committing a homosexual activity. And again, the first homosexuals we see in the Bible are Canaanites in the area of Sodom and Gomorrah, okay? So in particular, Canaan is particularly singled out. Ham is cursed as well, but not as much. Why? Because, well, he did look at it as far as negative, tells birds come look at it. But he also didn't punish his son or do anything like that. And remember, Nimrod came from Ham as well. All right, starts Babylon. Now, Shem means name. And yeah, Noah named his son name. And it's prophetic, because through Shem is going to come the people who bring the word of God, and so on and so forth. The name of God's going to be preserved through Shem, through descendants of Shem, particularly the Israelites eventually. So, Shem is Shem's descendants. He has many. When you look at Genesis 10, the table of nations or ethnic groups, the 70 root ethnic groups that all ethnic groups today came out of, and among them was the Almadati, beyond what's known, who the Native Americans came from, and DNA has proven this that they actually there's people in the Altai Mountains just north of where it says Shem's descendants all went to the just north of that point, that line up and down of Yoktan's descendants, a descendant of Shem, who went from that line east, and the north, and on that line goes north and south. You got kind of India, who also came from there. Ophir, Yaved, the Chinese, the Chinese genealogy actually shows that Yaved was their ancestor indeed, and Ophir's India, the land of peacocks and monkeys that Solomon traded with. But Amadad just trekked across what's today Russia, inside the Asian part of Russia, from Altai Mountains, which are kind of roughly where Kazakhstan, Russia, Mongolia, China kind of form in that little area, kind of almost touched, not quite. And the Altai Mountains are there, and all these ethnic groups along there carry that same Q haplop group that the Native Americans carry. So his lands are the rest of Asia that we talked about. Well, except for northern Asia, it belongs to one of the sons of Japheth, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, but let's say what's today Russia and Asia didn't belong to the sons of Shem. What today is the again Southwest Asia. People would say today didn't belong to the sons of Shem initially. But the rest of Asia did, North and South America, Australia, except Polynesian islands. You kind of get the idea. Everything that's not that northernmost part of Asia and the continent of Europe. Okay, so that's who this player is. And Canaan, by the way, means lowlands and speaks about the lowest nature of human beings. There's a lot to all that I could talk about. We're not going to today, though. But they all have connection to the mind, soul, and body, except the spirit, soul, and body, except. But notice what he says about notice notice what he says about Japheth. Japheth means enlargement or expansion, and God's going to enlarge him. So right here, he set this in the motion way back there, roughly like what, 2500 BC, no, 2000 BC. No, I had it right. 2500 BC. He has set 2400 BC. He has set in motion. He has framed all of human history. And how's he going to enlarge him? He's going to dwell in the tents of Shem. He's going to live in the places where Shem lives. He's going to go over there and colonize, okay, the tents of Shem. The dwelling place of Shem is going to live in his dwelling places. And Canaan's going to be a servant. And of course, that played out in American history. People coming from, because all the Europeans are from Japheth, coming from Europe, living over here, living over in America. Native Americans had the land first. And then, of course, Africans imported slaves and became slaves of both of these groups. Kind of reflecting that into Canaan. But Canaan, again, is particularly singled out. Okay, so you got this expansion going on, but now we're going to have to look. We're going to talk about some more, the players again, so we understand everything that's going on a little more deeper on the line of Japheth, whose name means enlargement or expansion. And here's what we read: the sons of we're going to read about a couple of his sons, and their sons. We'll get the full list in a moment, but the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Riphath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan, Elishah, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. These were the isles of the Gentiles dividing their lands. Everyone by his tongues, after their families in their nations. Okay, notice this expression here. And notice we're starting here. We're starting here with Genesis 3. We're actually going to start with this. And Japheth's the oldest son's why in this particular case. We're starting with him. And what we read? When we read Gomer, and some languages they can't make a G sound, they substitute a K sound, or something like KH sound, a softened K. And then Comer, except. Okay. Now who's his descendants? Ashkenaz Riphath, and Togarmah. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about the bottom ones first, and we'll come back to these. Yavin, Yavinic is a Hebrew word for Yavinic is a language of half Greek, half Hebrew, kind of mixed, kind of what Yiddish is, the German and Hebrew. Okay, because because there's since Yavin, but Elisha is the actual one the Greeks came out. But he's the oldest son, so he gets that association. Elisha, like the Elysian fields, are the fields of Elisha. Okay, in Greek mythology, if you died and the gods were pleased, you went to the Elysian fields, like the city in Texas. Okay, now Tarshish is who the Spanish came from and the Portuguese. Kitim, the Italians, the Latin, and Dodamine, the Cretans. Now notice that the connection. Dodamine literally means leaders. They invented the first writing systems. The first two didn't have alphabets that looked like squiggly lines, Cretan 1 and 2. The last time I checked, no one's ever been able to quite decipher them, but they know they were using them for writing. It's pretty obvious from the things they found them on. Um, and and don't but also these if you're gonna go to the islands, you gotta have sailboats you gotta have sailing to be particular. So for this really what's notable here is to contributing to this expansion from Donamine is being able to write down the written language, and sailing. Make boats with sails, wind power to move from place to place. That's very necessary if you're going to go out to islands that aren't very far away. You know, there are other options to manually do it, like the outrigger canoe, which yes can be done, has been proven, but it's not very efficient. You can't carry too many people at once. Pretty much everyone that goes there has to be strong. Has to be strong men at least on the first initial trip, and then and so on and so forth. And so it kind of limits how much really you can expand using that manual system. But wind really helped with this, okay? And of course the Romans and the Greeks both had their navies that made and Tarshish, the ships of Tarshish are spoken of many times. So you got this sailing aspect down here to help with this expansion. But up here, what we have is Togarmah, and that's the Turks today. Now, in biblical times, there were no Turks living in Turkey. They lived in what's today Mongolia. They were called the Xiongnu by the Chinese, and indeed the oldest writing Utabatar, I think so. Utabatar, right in the middle of Mongolia, is the oldest known Turkish writing ever found. Okay, well, what happened was the Chinese decide to invade the land of the Zhuebe, the Mongols. The Mongols lived in that area called Manchuria today. That's that part of China that's between the Koreas, North and South Korea, and Mongolia. Well, they invaded there, and the Mongols pushed out, went east, and invaded the Xiongnu, as the Chinese call them. However, the Mongolians call them Hanu. These are the Huns, the famous Huns like Attila the Hun, except that went westward into Europe. Well, eventually they finally ended up with the Anatolian Peninsula and a little bit more, and called it Turkey, meaning strong man in their language. In Turkish language, it means strong man. So the land of the strong man, okay? Because they had went all the way over to France and stuff, and the Romans, Romans managed to push back, except, and they kind of came to a deal. So they ended up with that land, Turkey. Later the Ottoman Empire today we call it Turkey, but that's when they kind of started moving in there, way after the time of the apostles. Now Riphath is people that came from them. We know from DNA has certified this. Finland, as well as like Magyars and people down in Hungary in that sort of area. sort of that Central Europe area. This brings us to Ashkenaz. Now, Ashkenaz name means a rapidly consuming fire. And two main groups came out of Ashkenaz over time: the Germans and the Celts. But they're biblically they're related to the same group as far as they're the same group as far as these root nations go. And it means a rapidly consuming fire. Now, the word Holocaust means a sacrifice by fire, and the word Blitzkrieg, lightning war, used by the Nazis. Well, it means lightning war. It's got the idea of a rapidly consuming fire or rapidly expanding fire. Okay, and so we got that aspect of the Germans, and the word German comes from Gomer also sometimes. It's also in some languages comes from this word Gomer as well. Perhaps being the older son, they got the older son of Ashkenaz. They got this, and the younger one associated with the Celts got this. Now the Irish say they came from Repop, but DNA shows they did not, at least through their father's line. And what's more likely is Ashkenaz. The leaders often have more than one wife, and just like we've seen with the children of Jacob, God often groups them according to their mothers, the children of Israel, these tribes of Israel, except does sort of arrangements based on their mothers. Well, the same sort of thing. So it's really probably their mothers. Their mother was a descendant of Ripoff, so they made that association. But again, DNA shows they're really not much, they're that much different than the rest of the Celts in many regards. Although they do have three different Irish 1, 2, and 3. They're kind of unique subsets, but they have the same common ancestor. That's what the DNA shows. So Ashkenaz is the Celts and the Germans. Now we're gonna dwell on a little bit more here about these other sons of Japheth here in First Chronicles 5 through 6. Gomer and Magog and Madai and Yavin and Tubal and Meshach and Tiras. Okay, again, important to know who the players are. Magog is Kazakhstan today. That area of Kazakhstan. Madai is where the Medes came from. Today we call them Iranians. Remember, until 1937, the country we call Iran was called Persia. There's two ethnic groups, the Medes and the Persians, and and they go back and forth in intrigue and stuff, trying to gain control. They're an alliance, but they're trying to gain control of the alliance. So one says the Medes have the upper hand at the beginning, but then later the Persians have the upper hand. Well, in the day that's went on back and forth throughout history, in the day the Iranians who came from the Medes have the upper hand. Okay, so now remember the Elamite. Elam's even a province in Iran today. It's along the coast, along the Persian Gulf. Notice the Persian Gulf, and they're from Shem, and they're darker skin. Because that's another thing about these Japheth's descendants. There's basically six shades over and six different undertones to give 36 basic colors. This 12 lightest, we're going to go with those 36, belong to Japheth, the descendants of Japheth. The 12 darkest belong to the descendants of Ham, and the middle ones belong to the descendants of Shem. And of course, a lot of variation. There's the variations in that range. Like I said, there's 36 basic colors altogether. Now, so these are all lighter skin. So we got Magog here. We got Gomer, we talked about. Yeah, we talked about him. But now Tubal's land was Siberia. That's the part of Russia today that's in Asia. In fact, until I believe it was Peter the Great, it was a separate kingdom that they took over, and its capital was called Tobolsk. It was located on the Tobol River. In their language, it's not pronounced Tubal; it's pronounced Tobol. And this being Hebrew, that you could be that could be pronounced either way. So Tobal is perfectly acceptable pronunciation as well. It's not real hung up on exact vowel pronunciation at times. But Tobal is Tobal is the part of Russia today that's in Russia. Meshek is who Moscow's named after. It's that part of Russia today that's in Europe. And Russia is the biggest country in Asia. The part in Asia is the biggest country in Asia. That the part in Europe is the biggest country in Europe as far as how much land they have. Because these two are often together, spoken together, along with sometimes Magog under a leader called Gog, who's not an ethnic group, he's a man. This leads us to Ross. Now, who's Taras? Taras is who the Scandinavians came from. Who the Scandinavians came from, and in particular, um, so we're talking about Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, of course, Greenland today because of colonization over there. Notice okay, right? Expansion all the way out to Greenland. But the main one that's going to expand is Gomer. And Gomer's Ashkenaz is remember Ashkenaz splits in the Celts and the Germanic. And indeed, Germanic tribe called Franks is who overran what's today France, became France. It was occupied by Celts before. Celts went over to Britain, the British were in the British Isles and in France and over in what's today Turkey. And we'll talk about that later. Well, the descendants of Gomer eventually are in part of Turkey also, as well as outside the Roman Empire and come down to those mercenaries the Romans hire, and they end up and their descendants end up running Spain. The Castilians, who were blonde-haired, blue-eyed descendants, they were descendants of these Germanic tribes. When Spain was formed in 1492, it's when Ferdinand of Castile married Isabella of Aragon. And there was a third country at the time called Granada, but was always left of the Moors who had invaded what we call Spain today. And they pushed them out, forming Spain today. But Portugal's a little part that the Germans had given to their ethnic. And anyway, make a long story short, Portugal stayed its own country. Okay. Didn't join them. They didn't take it over, stayed its own country. But also ends up on the throne, descendants of Gomer. Remember, Japheth, the oldest son of Noah. The oldest son had, remember, his the lose, the birthright and the blessing. The birthright twice the inheritance of the other sons. The blessing, the right to rule. Well, whose oldest son is who? Gomer. The birthright and the blessing among his children is Gomer's to lose. So Gomer ends up ruling Spain, France, Italy. The Lombards who took over Italy were Germanic. So Western Europe, as it were, talks about, and even over, and we'll talk about the British Isles there as well. Although it's perhaps not quite as clear. So that's kind of our players outside of the Celts and this close connection between the Germans and the Celts. And we'll talk more about that as we go along. Now we're going to jump way ahead in history to the days of Nehemiah. The days of Nehemiah. We're jumping forward. We're jumping forward here almost 2,000 years from the time of Noah. Okay, and here's what we read: "Set you up a standard on the land, and blow the nations among the." I'm sorry. Set you up a standard on the land. Blow the trumpet among the nations. Prepare the nations against her. Call together of her kingdoms against her kingdoms, against her the kingdoms of Ararat, Mani, and Ashkenaz. Appoint a captain against her. Cause the horse to come up as the rough caterpillars. Prepare against her nations with the kings of the Medes, the captains thereof, and all the rulers thereof, in all the land of her dominion. And the land shall tremble and sorrow. For every purpose of the Lord shall be performed against Babylon to make the land of Babylon desolation without inhabitant. And the mighty men of Babylon forborne to fight. They have remained in their hodes. They have they their might has failed. They became as women. They have burnt her dwelling places, and their bars are broken. So, this is Jeremiah talking about the coming of judgment of Babylon after this, before the 70-year exile went, but after it's over, how Babylon, you know, Babylon, yeah, God's sending Babylon there because he knows they're bad people, but he's gonna treat, but then he's gonna judge them for treating them badly. Because ultimately them coming in, being allowed to come in, was judgment on the people of Israel for behaving badly. Well, when it's all over, he's then, it's like he took a switch and whipped his kid with it, and then he's going to break the switch. Not going to use this one again. All right. So So some of these groups are going to come across in Ararat, the mountains of Ararat, or that's right, Ararat, or in Turkey today, near the Russian border. Okay. So there was a kingdom there, except now Mani's over there between there where Ashkenaz is. And Ashkenaz, notice here, is lined up, is in this alliance with the kings of the Medes. And I talking about the Medes and the Persians. The Medes have the upper hand at the beginning. And they're over there, and they're roughly in that area at this time. So similar, some call them Curry. They move. They're gonna move. They've been moving into what's Turkey today. Some people call them Hurrians or Hurrians, depending on the language. But the Hebrew, it's Ashkenaz. And as a result of aligning themselves with the Medes to destroy Babylon and create the Persian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, they're rewarded with land over in what's today, the Anatolia Peninsula in Turkey, the center part and down along the southeast corner today, where Turkey and Syria today still meet. Okay, so and there's two groups there. In that center part, the ancestors of the Germans get this larger part in the center, and the Celts get this lower part in the southeast corner, and they're associated with Iona, the Ionic Sea, except because they're going to be using boats and going along there. In fact, the sacred island of the Celts that's between Scotland and Ireland is called Iona today, because they're going to later immigrate all the way over to the British Isles. Now we're going to jump forward again another 500 years this time, and we're going to talk, and we're going to look at what happened to these Celts who are down that southeast part of what's called called Turkey today. They're along the coast and extending upward northward to the area where the Germanic part settled initially. And there arose certain of the synagogue, which is called the synagogue of the Libertines and the Corinthians and the Alexandrians, and them of Cilicia and of Asia disputing with Stephen. Now you might say, wait, Dan, it says Cilicia. You may have heard everyone say Cilicia. But it says Cilicia in plain Greek. It's literally the land of the Celts, okay? Now, so what happens? What happened in the land of the Celts? Remember that the Jewish people are scattered all over the Persian Empire. Many of them did not. We saw in the book of Esther, we saw about Purim or Purim, whichever you prefer to pronounce it. Again, Hebrew is not real strict on the pronouncing of a verb sometimes. Purim is very focused on the consonants. Anyway, the Jews were in every province we saw of King Ahasuerus, and that included a province of what became Cilicia, land of the Celts. When the Greeks took it over, they let them stay there. They just sort of they assimilated assimilated, accept. But they used to let them stay there. And the ones who didn't left, and we'll talk about them later. Okay, there may have been some wrong that they went off to and eventually ended up in France, outside the land of the outside the Greek Empire, the Macedonian Empire, and then later up there, and up there in the British Isles. But many of them stayed here in Cilicia. But they kind of have this thing where they're always getting in fights with each other and splitting up and moving and parting ways and expanding. Big Celtic expansion. But right now we're focused on this group that stayed there. And what we want you to notice is synagogues. There's a synagogue in Jerusalem of them. They've had synagogues for that entire time. The Jewish people who were in every province, we were told 127 provinces of the Persian Empire, the Persian Empire, stayed there and they built synagogues. And eventually, they have these God-fearers in there, particularly after the time of the Maccabees, who don't are not keeping dietary laws except, like not eating unclean food, except not circumcised. These are the ones Paul addressed when he says, men of the stock of Abraham, the Jewish people in the synagogue, and those who fear God. They're Gentiles who aren't circumcised, but they're not idol worshippers anymore either. Okay. Well, so this is what we have here, and also remember we've seen it over and over again. We'll see it as when we resume our study on Judges. How Hebrew Hebrew men throughout history have had this thing. I mean, Jewish women today have this complaint. They say we're highly sought after by everyone but Jewish men, and Jewish men have commented many times, "Hey, Gentiles, your women are hot." So they keep wanting to marry non-Jews. So, the unromantic truth is about everyone, not just the Jews, is people will marry or at least breed the available population. Well, no different than the Jews in Cilicia. Now we're going to talk about Cilicia's most famous Jew next. And that's here in Acts 21:39. And Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city of Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city. I beseech you, suffer me to speak to the people. Okay, by no mean city, no average city. And what he means by that is it's why he's a citizen. And what's outstanding about Tarsus was when the Romans started expanding and growing their empire, the Celts were known, like the Picts later, the Romans encounter in what, Scotland, as fierce fighters. But the king could see that the Romans would eventually win. They'd make it very costly for the Romans, but instead of having a costly victory, he offered costly fight. He offered the Romans a deal that if they would let the people of his country be citizens like Romans were, the same privileges as the Romans in their expanding empire, then they would not fight with them. They would become a province, and of course they would help with the army. And the Romans, took the deal. Okay, it was just like too good to pass up. They're getting this strategic piece of land without a fight, and getting people to help their army and the mercenaries to boot. So that's why this is very important, because that makes Paul a Roman citizen, because he's in Tarsus. We'll talk a little bit more about that more later. But a city of Cilicia. Notice Paul of these Celtic Jews, Paul is the most famous one of all. But he's still a Jew, okay? Make no mistake about it. And the thing is, I'm going to mention about it before I say still a Jew, is the pictures probably aren't accurate, but the ancient pictures that showed up as much as early as a couple 100 years after the death of Paul, maybe 150 years later. So perhaps passed down orally, then someone drew what they based on then passed on orally about what he looked like. Because there were people alive well after he died who knew him, and you know, and he's always lighter skinned than all the other apostles. Now, I'm not saying he looks like English, you know, but he's lighter in shade, and it's pretty apparent, these pictures that he's got some Celtic ancestry in the mix, but he's still a Jew, and this is what he's going to bring out here in Acts 22, 1 through 3. His Celtic connection is being born there and raised there, but he's still a Jew, and that through and through. And so here we see in Acts 22, 1 through 3, the following: Men and brethren and fathers, hear my defense I make now to you. When they heard he spoke to them in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence, and he says, I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous towards God as you all are this day. And notice he's speaking to them in Hebrew. He's letting them know, I'm one of you. Yes, it's true. He's born in Tarsus, the city of Cilicia, the capital of it. He's got that Celtic connection, perhaps through his mother or grandmother on his mother's side, or who knows, or maybe his mother and his father's mother. But he's still a Jew. In fact, he's a Jew. He makes a point in other places. In one of his letters, his patrilineal lineage goes back to Abraham. I mean, back to I'm sorry, Benjamin. Okay, or I have the tribe of Benjamin. So he's a Jew through and through, but he still has this connection to the Celts here in Cilicia. And not only is he a Jew, notice the feet of Gamaliel is one of the few rabbis that have ever been called the Great by other called the Great. He was the greatest rabbi of their day, and he's in the Bible a couple of times. Gives some advice some good advice about leaving the followers of Messiah alone, because if it's fall fake, it's going to fall apart anyways. And he's ignored despite all the respect everyone has for him. They don't take his advice. Shaul, the Apostle Paul, back in that time, being one of those who didn't take his advice, but was at the feet of. He's not just a student of Gamaliel; he's a star student. He understands the law inside and out, but he's also been steeped in Jewish traditions, which he refers to as, or I'll say it, King James, the dung heap. It's all, it's all a pile of, it's all a pile of manure, is what he's saying, that part. But he's not bringing it out here, of course. He was zealous towards God. Yes, as a Celtic connection. Yes, as some Celtic ancestry, but like David had an ancestry from multiple ethnic groups too, as well, but still a Jew through and through. Okay, so now this Celtic Jew that's a Jew through and through, we're gonna start tracking his we're gonna start tracking his movements across his time since the time he became a believer and met Messiah on the road to Damascus. He'd been in Jerusalem before then, came to persecute, but then, of course, something had happened. And oh, let's go back this way. So, Shaul, the Apostle Paul, the one with the Celtic connection, we read about him in Acts 9:27 through 30. And here's what we see. And Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostle, declaring to him how he had seen the Lord in a way, had spoken to him how he had preached boldly at Damascus in the name of Jesus. He was coming in and going out of Jerusalem. He was with them coming in and going out of Jerusalem. He spoke boldly in the name of Jesus and disputed against the Grecians. But they went about to slay him, which the brethren, when they knew, brought him down to Caesarea and sent him forth to Tarsus. Okay, so he had been preaching at Damascus, had to flee for his life. We know the story, but being loaded down through a basket. And he gets there and he's disputing against the Grecians. It doesn't mean they're Greeks, it means Greek speaking Jews. Remember, he speaks Greeks and Hebrew. Those ones in that synagogue Stephen had disputed with were Greek speaking Jews as well. They don't speak Hebrew, but they only speak Jew. Just like in America, Jews speak English. Very few actually speak Hebrew. So he's disputing against them. And notice, they're losing the argument, and their response isn't say, "Wow, you're right, Jesus, Yeshua's Messiah." It's to kill him, to kill the messenger. They're repeating what he himself had done before. They won't listen, just as he hadn't listened before he read Messiah on the road to Damascus. So notice, they brought him down to Caesarea. That's where he can catch a ship. And then what? Send him forth to Tarsus. Why Tarsus? Because he's from Tarsus. So now he is going back to the land of the Celts. Now we continue on Acts 11, verse 22 through 25. Now and notice now we're in Acts 11. In Acts 10 is Cornelius between the two. Okay, so they sent him there before Peter has encountered Cornelius and gets the revelation. God's no respecter of persons. Now I showed in a previous lesson, the Torah literally said that. God said, "I don't regard any man." One of the prophets literally used those words, "no respecter of persons." But somehow Peter didn't get it because the blinders put on him by the rabbis, they kept him blind from this. So now that's gone out. Now that this has come out, and they've said, and they went back in the beginning of Acts chapter 11. People dispute him, saying, "Hey, he's preached to the Gentiles and ate with them." Which there was nothing against Torah saying he couldn't eat with the Gentiles, just can't eat unclean food. And we shared apple pie together. It's probably there's no lard in it or something, but but they settle this matter. So now they're going to send forth Barnabas with this, about this. Hey, the Gentiles do not have to do it. And he's going to go as far as Antioch. Well, that's headquarters for him and Saul, him and Shaul, the Apostle Paul. That's what they operate out of, except Paul's not there anymore. So what did he do? He preached to them. And then he went to go get Saul. He goes to Cilicia, where the land of the Celts, where in the capital of it, Tarsus, where Saul is, to get him to go to carry on the next bit of work. But Shaul, the Apostle Saul, was ahead of all of them. And here's what we read in Galatians 1, 17 through 22. "Neither went I up to Jerusalem to them that were apostles before me, but I went into Arabia and returned again to Damascus. Then after 3 years I went to see Peter and abode with him 15 days. But the other apostles I saw none, save James, the brother of the Lord's brother. Now things I write to you, behold, before God I lie not. Afterwards I came down to the regions of Syria and Cilicia, and was unknown by face into the churches of Judea which were in Christ." Okay, we really came down to speed. We wasn't there very long, only 15 days. And notice, okay, between when he makes his first mission trip, when they go to Cyprus, and when he met Messiah on the road to Damascus, is 13 years. I literally made a big timeline mapping all this out, taking scripture meticulously, reading through everything. I read everything from Acts chapter 1, verse 1 through Revelation 4. Went through with a fine-tooth comb, read it in Greek, except made sure I understood everything. And it's been 13 years. Well, 3 of those years, notice here, are before he ever goes to Jerusalem. He went to Arabia first, and we know from other writings he talked to Messiah. It's like he understood that this Jesus was Messiah. He's like, hey, I have a few questions. I got some questions, and he asked him. But when he's done, he's got this revelation, not some sort of extra. What was the extra Torah, extra Nevi'im revelation, but more of a revelation what was already in there, but scattered throughout it. And he put it together, or more accurately, I should say, Messiah put it together for him during this time he's in Arabia. Now, 3 years go by between when he met Messiah on the road to Damascus and Arabia, or he returned again, I should say, Damascus. Now, that's when he's there those earlier. Now, he saw that afterwards I came to the regions of Syria and Cilicia, resembling the face of the Jew churches of Judea which were in Christ. Okay, so afterwards he's going to notice Cilicia. He's going back to Syria is where Antioch is. Cilicia is next door, the land of the Celts, where he's from. And he's preaching to them, and we know from his letters here in Galatia, he compares what he preached to what the apostles taught, and he found there was no difference. And he's out. He did his comparison after the Cornelius incident, by the way. He is up there. When he's up there, he's preaching to the Celts already, the Gentile Celts. The Messiah, the Messiah is for them as well, not just the Celtic Jews of Cilicia. He's already started preparing the Celts for this Celtic expansion, or perhaps I should say the great phase. They've been expanding some, but the great phase that's yet to come. Now, in Acts 15, verse 23 to 24, we read about sending off for the second mission trip. And there are letters to them after this manner. The apostles and the brethren send greetings to the brethren of the Gentiles which are in Antioch, Syria, and Cilicia, or Cilicia. For as much we've heard, certain which without have troubled you with words, subverting your souls, saying you must be circumcised and keep the law, to whom we gave no such commandment. Okay, you don't have to keep the law. We gave no such commandment. Now, what's that mean? I mean, let's just park there for a minute. Are they saying to these Celts, hey, go, it's okay. You want to go plunder, steal, rape, murder, create KM like mayhem like you've done, like you've done in the past? You're fine. You don't have to do that. No, he's talking about in Acts 21, verse 25 and 21, customs of the law. In 25, verse 25, it says, we gave no such commandment to keep the customs of the law. The customs of the law are those things we talked about before, like circumcision, except those things that we've shown from the Torah, where God says, we're going to do, you are going to do these things to set you apart from all other people. And if they get circumcised, now they're counted as Jews, they're no longer counted as a Gentile. So the Gentiles who believe cannot, necessity must not be circumcised and committed to keeping all these customs. No such commandment to these customs. But notice where these Gentiles are in Cilicia. This might be for the first. This is actually, I guess, for the first sending, for the first mission. Nope, it's not. They came back for the first mission. But notice why is there churches in Cilicia? Because Paul had established them. Shaul, the Celtic Jew, had established churches among the Celtic Gentiles. He's the first apostle to the Celts, as it were. And we talked about a disciple of this called Ilid, who was also a disciple of the Celts, but didn't go over there until much later into the British Isles. But he's in Cilicia, sort of the homeland, the original homeland of the Celts in a way, since the time of the Persians. Now, in Acts 15, verse 40 through 41, read the following. Shaul, cho, Paul chose Silas and departed, being recommended by the brethren of the grace of God. And he went through Syria and Cilicia, confirming the churches. Okay, he goes through Cilicia. He's going there. Then he's going to go up and he's going to go Galatia after this, where the Germanic descendants of Ashkenaz went, settled in at. Remember that connection? They're both from Ashkenaz. Gomer being the bigger one, being the Gomer German comes from that word Gomer because being the elder son, the oldest son of the oldest son, Ashkenaz being the oldest son, which is the German word, Hebrew word for German, by the way, is Ashkenaz. So even to the day, that's what they're called, Ashkenazi Jews, etc. Well, Cilicia was the younger brother, got this. He's going through there first, and then he's going to go up to there. So he starts again his mission trip. Syria, Antioch's headquarters. Syria is the land on the land between him and Cilicia. Goes to Cilicia, then starts going north, and he's going to go on his journey. Now we're up to a second missionary journey. I'm sorry, his third one. Okay. His third missionary journey, and let's read what we see in Acts 16:4 through 7. As they went to the cities, they delivered them the decrees to keep. They ordained the apostles and the elders which were at Jerusalem. So were the churches established in faith, increased in number. Now they had gone through Phrygia and the region of Galatia, were forbidden of the Holy Spirit Ghost to preach the word in Asia. After they were coming to Mysia, they essayed to go to Bithynia, but the Spirit suffered them not. Okay, now first thing I want you to notice is he's not just going places willy-nilly. He's going where the Spirit of God, the Holy Ghost, is telling him. Forbids him to go to Asia. Now, Asia, don't think the continent of Asia today. It's central that central part of the west coast of Turkey today, okay, where Ephesus was. And he was forbidden at that time to go into Asia. He does get there later. We got the book of Ephesians, etc. But at that time he wasn't. And Mysia, so they come to this Mysia, and they were going to go north to Bithynia, and he said no, and they ended up going. Make a long story short, going up into Greece instead, and going up to the area of Philippi, etc. And then end up in Corinth, as it were. End up in Corinth and come home. Well, they are in Phrygia. So they've gone through Galatia. Well, what's Phrygia? Phrygians, here's what Herodotus wrote about Phrygians. They were blonde, we'll talk about them first. They were blonde haired, light skinned, the lightest of all skin, according to him, blue eyed, and dim witted. That's actually what he wrote. They are Teras's descendants. Taras, and we know this for a fact, that when they went from this area up north to the Black Sea, up the Bug River, some people say bug, it's spelled B-U-G, but it's pronounced Bug, and then up to the Baltic Sea and followed it to the Baltic Sea. When they went to settle Sweden, Scandinavia, and later, and they expanded and went to Norway. And in Finland, in the middle, different ethnic group we talked about. They made an agreement, and so they got Norway along the coast over there, and eventually formed this large empire, the North Sea Empire, that goes all the way, eventually, well, to Greenland. Actually, over to North America, they made a colony there, and it's been found. Of course, we know this colony's been found, and it's an archaeological park now over in Canada. Okay, so they make this, and they go in England and Ireland and Russia. Rus Rus was a group of Swedes. Mother Russia is named after the Rus. Okay, and that's why you see like a lot of the Russian leaders have blonde hair, blue eyes, and blonde hair and blue eyes. And historically, earlier the earlier ones, you see all the pictures of the czars, dark hair, dark eyes, except for the common people, black hair, not just dark, black, like with Georgia, not the state of Georgia, the I guess it's a country now that used to be part of the Soviet Empire, but that sort of darker hair, darker eyes, except for their leaders who had blonde hair and blue eyes because they got this. And this in England also, where they invaded. And that's why, like Princess Diana had blonde hair and blue eyes, except, and you got that going on in England, and sometimes it's mixed. But historically, the Celts who lived there didn't, the Celts who lived there had red hair or black hair, okay, or perhaps dark brown hair. So they're tied in, particularly in England, you get them tied in with the Celts, especially. Well, there's other places that people tied into Celts is Galatia. Gala means, Greek word, means milk white skin. Herodotus noted that they were known for their milk white skin. And they're the next lightest color to these ancestors of the Norwegians in Phrygia. Now, the in fact, those dumb little hats people wear at Christmas that with a bald thing that kind of bends over the top is called the Phrygian hat because the priest of the idol worshippers of Phrygia wore them back, when it was down in what's today Turkey. Well, Galatia, milk white skin. The Gauls, also in France, what's today France, they were called Gauls by the Romans. That province of Gaul, they said it was the same name. And the Germans who are north outside the Roman Empire, they referred to as barbarians. Those Germans spoke the same language according to I think it was Finney the elder, as the people in Galatia. And also these Celts in the Roman province of Gaul, and we'll talk more about them a little later here. But okay, so you got this tie here. So you got these three groups tied together, similar to what happens in Britain over what the British Empire, United Kingdom over time. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But notice it's by the Holy Spirit that they went to Galatia and Phrygia. It's a spirit directed thing, not just Paul having it say, hey, this is a good ideal. I got some familiarity with some of their customs, blah, blah, blah. I'll go, I, the Celtic Jew, will go to the German Jews and then the Nordic Jews, and start and go there. So, no, this wasn't his ideal. This was entirely the Spirit of God's leading him, the Ruach HaKodesh. Now, we're going to continue on here in Acts 18:21 through 23. And we're going to see the next thing that happens with regards to this. And bidding him farewell, so I must all means keep the feast come to Jerusalem, but I'll return again to you if God will. And he sailed from Ephesus. We landed at Caesarea, went up and saluted the church, and went down to Antioch. Spent some time there, departed went all over the country of Galatia and Phrygia in order, strengthening all the disciples. Okay, so he's ending his second one. Now this feast he's talking about is Pentecost. Again, I did a timeline. And why this plays into his urgency. We'll look at why he's going to be in Pentecost, why he's got to get there certainly, but he has to be there on that day because he needs to be there on a feast day. And the thing about Pentecost, it's only one day. Now, during Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, in total you have 8 days. The 14th day is when the lamb's prepared and the lamb slain towards sundown. Then the Feast of Unleavened Bread begins on the 15th day and lasts the last 7 days, so the 21st day. Tabernacles on the other end, when people are all together, is also 8 days. A little more leeway. But here, this is a one day, and he doesn't travel on the Sabbath, by the way. I've mapped all this out and verified, yeah, he could get away with not traveling on the Sabbath. Now, the exception maybe when he was in a prison ship, he didn't have control. But, as much as was in him, he didn't travel on the Sabbath. Okay. So he's got this urgency to get there. And notice when he's there, he doesn't spend, he goes up, takes care of his business in Jerusalem, says howdy to the people there, and he goes back to his headquarters of Antioch. Okay. After he spends now he's at Antioch for some amount of time. I won't go to hell for a little bit. Now he's going back to Galatia and Phrygia in order. And here's the thing people miss. Galatia and Phrygia are landlocked. They don't share a border with Syria. And notice the order. Galatia to the east, then Phrygia to the west. He's going back to Corinth. This is his third mission trip. He's going to end up ultimately in Ephesus, the capital of Asia, where he wanted to go before on the second trip. To get to Galatia from Syria, he had to go through Cilicia. So here on his third mission trip, he goes to Cilicia first as well, just as he had done before. He's going there, and strengthening the disciples. He strengthened the disciples in Cilicia. And there's a road, I cannot remember its name, but Roman historians wrote about it. They went through Cilicia up to Galatia, and it was very dangerous. One of the historians wrote about how it was scattered with the skeletons of people, of men all over. There were all kinds of wild beasts, and particularly wild beasts, and even the Roman army was afraid to go down this road. They only do so under dire straits. But the Celts, business as usual for them. And Shaul, the Celtic Jew, trusted in God to take care of him and went down this road as well. But he thought it was important enough to go to Cilicia to do this. Even though it's not mentioned here geographically, we know he had to go through there to get to Galatia from where he was. Now we get some insight into what's so important, so urgent. They had to be in Jerusalem on that day of Pentecost. Now, concerning the collection of saints, I've given the order to the churches of Galatia, even so you do. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store as God prospered him. Be no gatherings when I come. When I come, whosoever you shall approve by your letters, them I'll send your liberality unto Jerusalem. Okay. Well, he had to be there because he took a collection before, and if you go back and read your Torah, these 3 times a year, people brought their tithes in. Also, gifts for the poor. Well, he collected gifts for the poor from all these churches he started, these Gentile churches, not because, he does say in his appeals, hey, you kind of do owe him something, your salvation. But it wasn't a matter of giving them something because they kept the word of God and stuff and were just being lazy. They were under persecution. People would not hire them, would not buy from them, would not sell to them. They were trying to force them to deny Messiah and come back into the rabbinic fold. Well, God's provision was these Gentile churches. But how's he going to know how's he going to be able to get to them? He doesn't know all these people necessarily. Well, Judea is all over. They may even be facing that persecution outside Judea, the Roman province, in the surrounding ones. Well, they're going to be there for Pentecost. So he's going to bring that so they can get the help provided by God through the Torah on Pentecost, or Shavuot, if you prefer the Hebrew, which means weeks. Oh, and also notice, this first day of the week here is also a place, it's a little bit of a mistranslation. It's Mia Sabbaton in Hebrew, and literally the word Amera, day, is not even in there at all. It's really first Sabbath, and the translators didn't understand, didn't have the kind of understanding of that, because the same expression, Mia Sabbaton, is also used the day Messiah was resurrected, but another gospel, it actually used the word Amera, first day of the week. So they just assumed that was an expression that meant the first day of the week. They understand what the first Sabbath was. Well, the first a first Sabbath is these days when these collections are made for the poor at Pentecost. Remember, like Pentecost is a high Sabbath. It's also a Sabbath. You're to congregate together and not to do any servile work. But in that week, there's two Sabbaths that week. The weekly Sabbath at the end, Shabbat, and in this case, Shavuot. It's the first Sabbath. So it's actually referring to these actual holidays, the Jewish holidays. And these are the only holidays that were taught to these Gentile churches. They met on the Sabbath. We see it over and over again. They didn't do that. They didn't do this because they had to be saved, but it is they were being grafted into this system, as it were, and that's what the people who were teaching them were doing. That's when they were meeting, except so this is when the saints had to meet. Saints, Hagios, Greek Hagios, Tzedekим. Notice we're not talking about Catholic saints, and we talk about Saint Patrick. I'm not saying like in the Catholic sense, who they declared a saint, a saint they claim tried to bring people, were the first person to bring Irish people into the Catholic fold, and it's just totally a lie. He actually in his own writings, they said will destroy his writings and largely succeeded, but Confessio, part of it lived, 87 paragraphs of it lived, but the writings of his disciples weren't destroyed, the people who knew St. Patrick. And I'm saying this in the biblical sense, a righteous one. And even when they sent a monk later, almost 200 years, 150 years later, who tried to bring the Celtic Christians into the Catholic fold, he wrote back. He wrote this about Patrick. He said, "I don't think it's going to be possible because Patrick, because they celebrate the same holidays as the Jews. They don't eat unclean food as the Jews. They meet on Sunday. They meet on the Sabbath instead of Sunday like the Jews. And St. Patrick warned them to have nothing to do with us." Now that is the real St. Patrick, and I've written a blog post about it, and I go into great detail where you make and give you enough information you can confirm every bit of it if you want. But he was nothing like the Roman Catholic fake St. Patrick that people think of today. He was a saint, just as they mentioned here, in the biblical sense. Okay, first missionary, first apostle to the Irish. Certainly not the first believer to go there, by any means. Not the first to bring the gospel there by any means. One of their Irish kings, about 100 years before Patrick was born, 150 years before he was born, if I remember right. But before Patrick was born, became a believer and was killed by other Irishmen, but was killed in a coup for becoming a follower of Messiah and rejecting the religion of the Druids. So, I took a little digression there. I want to explain this word saint, though, not to give you the right biblical understanding of the word. And if you hear me say Saint Patrick, I'm referring him to him in this sense, not in that Catholic sense. Okay. Now, notice we started with the churches of Galatia. So he's been doing this all along. He set in order in Galatia and Phrygia, and he had to go through Cilicia too. He is setting these in order so that on these first Sabbaths they can gather them. He's teaching, so he's establishing the right way with these Galatians, these people of Germanic descent. And in Galatians 1:2, we read the following. Paul, an apostle, not of men, neither by man, by the Lord Jesus, but by Jesus Christ, God the Father, who raised him from the dead, and all the brethren with me unto the churches of Galatia. Okay, he's not the only one who went there. Paul brought Peter along on his third trip. We actually asked for help, and Peter comes along, has some connection with the Galatians as well, along with some of the other apostles. Okay, and he writes this from Corinth, by the way. Okay, so Timothy's from that area of Galatia. He's in an area called Derbe, a sub region, but he's connected the Iconians, etc. Icon, Icon, and the Laconians was another group that but remember, he's a Jew. He's a Germanic Jew, a Galatian Jew. As far as called the Greek, because that's a cultural thing, because the Greeks made everyone adopt the Greek culture. But he's in this area. So you got that Jewish, German, Celtic connection going on there as well. So he's investing a lot in these Celts and Germans. A lot of his time, a lot of his effort, a lot of his energy. He even started with the people in Cilicia. And remember, he's doing it by the leading of the Holy Spirit, the whole thing. Now, in Acts 23, verse 31 through 35, we read the following about this investment and how it ties in to the Celts and this Celtic expansion. Because remember, they've already expanded, we saw, from an area around the Caucasus Mountains where the Ashkenaz were. That's where the word Caucasian comes from, over into the Turkish province. And now they've expanded and all the way over to what's Ireland today. What's Ireland? The westernmost known part of the known world at the time. The Norwegians don't discover Iceland for quite a while till after that. I mean, they've expanded they've had this westward expansion from the beginning, and they've been expanded as far west as they know, as the world, the western edge of the known world. They don't know about beyond what's seen, the new world yet. But they're already expanded as far as they can westward. Now, then the soldiers of command then took Paul and brought him that night to Antipatris. There we are, Antipatris. And on the morrow they left the horsemen to go with him and return to the castle, who, when they came to Caesarea, delivered the epistle to the governor, presented Paul before him. And when the governor read him, he asked what province he was. He understood he was of Cilicia, and he said, I will hear you. He said he, and when your accuser also come, the commanded to be kept in Herod's judgment hall. Okay, we see this Celtic connection with Saul, the Celtic Jew, Shaul, coming into play again. He an appeal to Caesar because of being born in Tarsus, the capital of Cilicia. And notice that even though he was raised in Jerusalem from a young age, he lived there, and he's done all this traveling since. He's still counted by his birthplace, Cilicia. And now, why is this important? Because Cilicia is an imperial province. Some of these provinces are senatorial. Some also, the Romans had a kind of a weird system, client kingdom, so on and so forth. Well, if you're in an imperial province, if you're in a senatorial province, the senator, whoever appoints the highest authority, you cannot appeal to Caesar. I mean, you can appeal, but you don't necessarily have to. But the governor here of Judea is appointed over Judea, but actually, technically, it's a client kingdom still. Just say governor had to come in. They put a governor in there supposedly temporarily. Now, for him because it's an imperial province and the governor represents the imperial government, he can hear this message. Otherwise, he'd have to be handed over to the local authorities. Now they're going to go in Roman court, not the Jewish court, the Judaic court, local court ran by the enemies of Messiah, the Sadducees, the chief priests and the Sadducees and the scribes are Sadducees, and they ran that court. Remember, the Pharisees had taken the side with Paul when he said I'm calling the question about the resurrection. But he's saved from being from them and going through the Roman court system because of this Celtic connection. Now we're going to jump ahead towards the end of the life of Shaul, the Apostle Paul, and we're going to read in 2 Timothy 4, verses 6 through 10. And now I'm ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. There is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day. Not only me also, not only, but unto them all that love is also that love is appearing. Do your diligence come shortly to me. For Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world, and is departed to Thessalonica. Cretans to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Now, if you haven't mapped all this out, it may not be clear to you, so I'm going to give it to you. Acts chapter 2, Paul spends 2 years after he's in Rome. I mean, Acts, the last chapter, ends with Paul 2 years up there in Rome. I think it's 24 chapters. Yeah. In Rome, and finally has an appeal with Caesar. Ends with him waiting, and he's in his own hired house and people coming and going. He's preaching the whole time. Well, from his own letters, like right here, Dalmatia is never a place he went to in Acts. But from his own letters, we can piece together he had a fourth journey that mostly he went back to the place he'd been to and strengthened them. They picked up a couple of places, Heraclium and Dalmatia, which are basically areas along between Italy and north of Greece, east of Italy, north of Greece, in the area of Albania today. He established some more churches there. And he sent Titus to there, who had sent to Crete before in the book of Crete. Titus has not departed from the faith, has forsaken him. Demas is the one that's forsaken him. He went to Thessalonica, perhaps he was from there. But Paul sent Titus to Dalmatia to take care of this new church he had established there, just as he had left him before in Crete, as we see in the letter to Titus. Now, but notice he sent a guy all the way from Rome to Galatia. Now, he's sending these people out. I mean, this first guy's leaving because of fear of the Romans. Paul says, my time ready to be offered. But after this, it's about 67 AD. After that, after Paul's first time up there, there's the burning of Rome. Nero started it, by the way. I mean, there's plenty of historical suspected this day, and now it's pretty much been it's been confirmed through enough gathering of information, and blamed the Christians, made Christianity in Rome, in the region of Rome, not the whole empire, but the first Roman persecution, official persecution, starts under Nero, and Paul's in Rome when this happens and arrested. And there's plenty of evidence for him to be executed, but he's a Roman citizen because of his connection to Cilicia and appeals. And that's why he tells, try to make it before winter, except to Timothy. Well, he knows his time on earth is about over. And he makes sure he sends someone to take care of the churches in Galatia. Way over there, if you kind of imagine Turkey being right towards the center of Turkey today, he's making sure these Germans and of course the Celts are right below there in Cilicia are being taken care of to continue in the faith after he's gone, because he understands their importance. Expansion. He knows there's another Celtic expansion coming. He perhaps doesn't understand it completely, doesn't understand the geography of the whole world the way we do, but he knows from Scripture enlargement. They've been expanding westward till there's no more westward to expand, as far as they know at that time. Ever expanding westward. And he's prepared them for it. And he wants to make sure they're prepared for that expansion. In 1 Peter 1:1, read the following. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the strangers scattered throughout unto Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. Okay, Pontus but then you remember Paul wanted to go there before when he was in Mysia and had to go through Mysia instead. Okay. Bithynia and Pontus are the north coast of Turkey today. Asia, where Ephesus was, Peter had been there before. All right. Cappadocia. Cappadocia is on the west, on the far eastern edge of Turkey today. It was the eastern, not far from the bridge of peace. That's what it was literally called, where you crossed over it and you were now in the Parthian Empire. Rome had another Rome to deal with to the east called Parthia. It may not quite as big as Rome, but it was a considerable problem for them. Well, they had a big period of peace here at the fullness of time when Messiah came, and they had this floating bridge and once you cross it, Roman, if you could be a criminal in Rome, and once you cross it, you're Scot, there's no extradition or anything. Okay. And the fact that Peter, according to this letter, wrote it from Babylon. It wasn't code for Rome. It was code for Babylon. Okay, there's a bunch of Babylonian Jews there. Hardly any Jews in Rome, and the ones after this persecution Nero, the ones who were there left a lot of them. He's going to Babylon as the second or third largest Jewish population in the world at the time. Now, but notice he makes sure he takes care of Galatia, and he's taking care of the northern part. So Paul, if you look at the map of ancient Galatia, took care of the southern half. Well, he's taking care of the northern half of this country. God is making sure Galatians, these Germanic people who are going to connect to those Germanic people to the west later, and of course the people below them, connected right below them in Cilicia, are prepared because of this. Because remember, Japheth expansion. There's another expansion coming. They may not understand it, but they know it's coming. And here's why they know. This is the entire reason why all this preparation and tracking of this ethnic group was there, because the Bible didn't give ample space, not ample, equal space to everyone. Obviously, the people of Israel get the lion's share. Most of the other people that are mentioned frequently are people that ruled over at various points. The Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, Babylonians, Assyrians, Persians. But this other group here, the Celts, get all this press we're looking at. And there's really a lot more I could have covered, by the way. The Celts and the Germans, the descendants of Ashkenaz, get all this press in the word. And they never ruled over them in biblical times, over the people of Israel. They've had this association with them since the time of the Persians, at least, but they never ruled over them. Okay. Well, why all this press? There's other ethnic groups. They get one mention, only really the root ethnic group over in Genesis 10, never to be heard of again. Why is this one getting all this? Why are we showing all this preparation of this particular group? Because of the Celtic expansion that is yet to come from the time of the apostles. But they know is coming. And here's why they know it. Matthew 28, verse 19 through 20. Go you therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. Teach and observe all things whatsoever commanded you, and lo, I'm with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen. Okay, this word world, just to let you know, is aeon in Greek. It literally is age, the end of the age. Okay. The world doesn't end until there's a new heaven, new earth. Even then, it's technically renewed. The age ends, okay, to the end of the age. What age? The one of preaching the gospel. So notice the Great Commission. Teach what? All ethnic groups. Baptizing them. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And teaching them to observe to do whatsoever commanded you. And he's going to be with us to do this. Now, we start understanding this, God's purpose, Yahuwah, Yahuwah, however you like to pronounce it. If you want, stick to his, you want to stick to his, try to pronounce the name that we have no way of knowing how to pronounce. We just know the Hebrew letters. His purpose in all this. He sees the end from the beginning. He sees what they're going to do. And so in their expansion, they're the ones that are going to expand westward. They're going to expand to the land of the Almadadi, the land that was not to those who were beyond what was known, the new world. Remember, the Spaniards go over and the Portuguese get Brazil because of the papal bull 1492, and the Spaniards get the rest. And that's how also come the Spaniards were given the Philippines, because the Pope basically said, I'm cutting the world in half. This part's Spain's, that part's Portugal's, with no regard to the people who actually lived on the land in any of these places. Well, today the Spanish, every country south of the United States except Brazil is ran by Spanish descendants. In Portuguese, and of course Brazil, Portugal is ran by Portuguese descendants. All of them, their rulers are from Germanic tribes. Every single one of them are from these Germanic tribes of Ashkenaz. So you got that Germanic thing. But the thing is, they didn't really bring the gospel to these places, but they opened the door for another group to bring it to them. And this is where the Celts come in. People think of Celtic groups, they maybe think of Galicia, which is in Spain, on the west coast of Spain, a little area where they speak a Gaelic language. They think of Scotland, Ireland, maybe some islands like Manx, whatever. It's got its own language, Gaelic language. It's got its own Celtic language there. Wales, Cornwall, Cornish. Now they think of these as, in Brittany, that part of France right across from the English Channel from Britain. It's called Brittany. They're similar to Britain, and they are also a Celtic group, and they're actually an autonomous region in France as well. Okay, and they still speak a Celtic language there as well. But there's one group people do not think of being as Celtic, and that's the British. The British Isles, notice, is this Celtic land, because the British and the English are not the same. English is the Gaelic word for the British word for Germans, because the Anglos and the Saxons and the Jutes and so on were Germanic tribes that moved into England starting under the Roman Empire. The Romans hired them as mercenaries, and then they didn't want to leave, and they finally ended up making peace with them, and they stayed there. The Romans been there. The Romans brought, of course, Latin, and you end up with British language starts fading to British Latin. It's kind of like a Yiddish, whatever. It's not really British. It's not really Latin, but they adopt the Latin alphabet that we use to this day. Okay, start writing, and it never fades. Well, these Germanic tribes later, more of them move in, and they form England. They form the land of the Germans, literally in England. They're called England. English, before the Great Vowel Shift, is pronounced Anglish, somewhat because people now were ish, meaning there's some intermarrying going on. They were no longer just German; they were Germanish. Okay, they got some mixed ancestry going there with the Brits. Well, they're also British. Prince Charles is also titled as the Prince of Wales. Wales being a Celtic one. So So British is Celtic. Gaelic is German. Well, they also had the Dane laws. It was called eventually from people from Daneland from Danish people that moved in there, but initially and they ended up making a treaty with them, except inside of what's actually a little bit north, kind of on the border of England and Scotland today, to the harrowing of the north, and you got all this mixed in of these descendants of Ashkenaz and Taras in there. Notice Taras of the sailing, Vikings sailing, right? And of course, Spanish were known for their sailing as well. Well, so they form so they now are going to expand in an incredible way, but they're all they're very firmly grounded in the gospel. There's been fighting against it, but they're grounded in that, and there's a determination about these people. I mean, go therefore and teach all ethnic groups. That's the sort of thing that just grabs them. They're used to this expansion, this sense of adventure of going where they've not gone before, seeing what they've not seen before, doing what they've not done before, etc. And so they start expanding. The Celtic expansion includes the British Empire. Notice that British Celtic Empire. It literally wraps the earth, and with them are missionaries who go to teach all these ethnic groups in all these areas. But they're not the only Celtic expansion. We'll talk about the other group here in a moment here. In Mark 16, verse 15 through 18, read the following. And he said unto them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He that believes and is baptized shall be saved. He that believes not shall be damned. These signs shall follow and believe. In my name they shall cast out devils. They shall speak with new tongues. They shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. Okay, well, the final invasion of England that was successful was 1066 by William the Conqueror, who was also in France, but of a more direct German extraction. His group was in came in later than the Franks. Okay, and they made a settlement with the French and gave them this part, and came over and conquered England. That's when the vowel shift I was talking about occurred. It went from English to English. Now, so you got that connection of Ashkenaz expansion, and we see all these countries here in Western Europe, particularly. We see Italy a little bit going into North Africa. Germany, some in Africa, of course, had some colonies. France, more so, North America and Africa, and in other places like that. But particularly the lands of Shem. The Dutch, Deutsch, German word for German is Deutsch, Dutch, or another a branch of the Germanic, Belgium, Belgia, which is another group. Anyways, they go and they colonize where? Not take over China. They colonize Hong Kong. The British do. I'm sorry, but Shanghai, up in Japan. They down in India, down I think it's the area of Goa. They established Dutch colonies for trading, right? In here in North America, New York, New York area up there, Orange County in New York has nothing to do with oranges. It has to do everything to do with William of Orange, this Dutch guy. Anyways, so there's this Dutch. So these Dutch have also done this too, and of course the Spanish. But as I said, they mostly brought Catholicism with them, which is largely idol worship, where they've changed the names of them to idols to Mary and Jesus. But nonetheless, there's if someone that will seek God with all their heart, they will find Him, God's promise, and there's at least a knowledge to seek the real Messiah from that. And they're run, of course, by those Germanic tribes as well set up. Well, the British have now set up this other. Now the British have got their British Empire set up, but there's this other group. And I'm going to read this again, and we're going to talk about them. I'll read it the first time. Mark 16:15 through 18. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He that believes and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believes not shall be damned. These signs shall follow them that believe. In my name they shall cast out devils. They shall speak with new tongues. They shall take up serpents, and they drink any deadly thing, and shall not hurt them. They shall lay their hands on the sick, and they shall recover. Okay, notice this. Going into all the world. I mean, that's pretty massive when you think about it. Preach to every creature doesn't mean giraffes and whatever. It's talking about every type of person. Okay, you got to have someone that's going to expand to do this. And notice what? And notice if you believe and you're baptized, you're saved. If you believe not, you're going to be condemned. Not baptized. Not the thief on the cross wasn't baptized. Baptism is an outward expression of an inward experience, and you're letting the world know I identify with Messiah. You know, back in Roman days, that could get you killed. There were no casual followers in Rome during the time of the Apostle Paul. So, in his final days there. Now, notice this next part here. That's just about like Pentecostalism here we're talking about. Casting out demons, speaking in tongues, taking up serpents. They lay hands on the sick, they're gonna recover. Okay. And this thing here about now we see all these happen in the life of the Apostle Paul. He says, I thank God I speak more. But it's not just for them. It's not for notice, it doesn't say apostles, pastors, teachers, evangelists, prophets. It says these signs will follow them that believe. They're going to follow them. Why? To confirm the message, this gospel. And they're going to take up serpents. And this means on accident, like the Apostle Paul when he was bitten on Melita by a serpent and shook it off in the fire. If they drink a deadly thing on accident, not going to hurt them. It's all a sign, and that's in the last verse of Mark, verse 20, says these signs follow them as they preach the gospel to confirm the word. In the day, it's the how long is this? How long are these signs to go? Till the Great Commission's finished, till we've preached into all the world and preached the gospel to every person, every type of person. So, if the Great Commission's ended, so have the signs. If you don't have the signs, it's because you're not preaching the message, because it will follow you. You don't have to work it up. You don't have to do something particularly. You don't have to seek for them necessarily. They will follow you if you're preaching the message, the gospel. And why would people not preach the gospel? Fear of persecution, because Messiah also promised persecution. Well, these Celts like a fight. I mean, there's a saying in England about the Scots, or about people who fight. They fight like Scots and Irishmen. They fight like Scots and Englishmen. They fight like Scots and other Scots. They're not given the backing down from a fight. And they're not afraid of controversy. They're not looking to play it safe. They are looking to expand, and so they did. And among those expansions, the only country to ever break free from the British by its own might, by military power, was the United States of America. Who was it? Who was it colonized by? Englishmen, New England, Scotsmen oh gosh, I just faced it. John Paul Jones. Mr. His ship's burning, his ship's on fire, and he's like, I've not yet begun to fight. They got and they're expanding. They're going, and they in Britain have sent most of the missionaries to most of these places in the world. This is the purpose for the Celtic expansion. to bring the gospel into all the world. And the Americans, particularly, this Pentecostalism, if you want to call it that, from people speaking in tongues of Pentecost, why it's called that. This is particularly, it starts a little bit, it's happened historically in the British Isles off and on, but modern day, that's who's in it. And they're the ones who primarily have gone down to south of the U.S. border into these Spanish-speaking countries, and that brought and you got all these non-Catholic churches scattered throughout there now, mostly from these people who practice Pentecostalism in some degree, whether charismatics or whatever the case was, or evangelicals who, believe it or not, yes, they're tongue-speaking Baptists, okay, but these people are preaching the message, and it's being confirmed with these signs, and they're primarily been Americans who've done that, and Americans have been this way for a while. In the 1800s, primarily Methodists and Baptists, they started sending people to Africa on steamers to preach to the Africans. And and those who went packed all their belongings in a coffin to save on shipping costs. And because they were going to need it. The average life expectancy was 1 year. 1 year. You're going to be able to preach for some part of that year. You're going to catch malaria, or an animal's going to kill you, or the people you're going to go preach to are going to kill you. So you expect to be there a year. Now you think, modern wimpy America, you wouldn't have any takers hardly. But they had 50,000 do this. And the thing is, they could have had 200, they could have had 3-4 times as many go. They just didn't have the money for passage for everyone who signed up to go. Because, again, show the Celts a fight, and they will not back down from it. This is the reason for the Celtic expansion. They've carried out the Great Commission in the last 200 years more than anyone else. And that's the reason why, from the beginning, they will expand. Back with the words of Noah. Japheth's going to expand, and then particularly Ashkenaz, who's the Germans and the Celts. In Acts 1, verse 8, you find the following. You shall receive power after the Holy Ghost come upon you. You shall be witness to me both in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria, unto the uttermost part of the earth. And Celts have done this. This Celtic expansion. Think about Australia. Think about the former British Empire. Wrapped the earth. Canada. Australia. The sun never went down on it once upon a time until they kind of turned against the Jews, and then they lost the British Empire. They sought to take the land away from the Jews. They had promised them, so God took land away, took most of their empire. But they went to the othermost parts. They went there, and the Americans have followed and went as well to the othermost parts of the earth. There's nowhere they've not gone to. If they got to preach the penguins in Antarctica, they would have done it, okay? This is the purpose of the Celtic expansion. And that notice they went with the Holy Ghost came upon them. Now, the apostles took care of Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria. And they went to some parts of the earth, but really not that far comparative. Now we know the size of the whole earth from Judea. But the Celts have gone to the othermost parts of the earth. There's nowhere that they've not expanded to. And even today, America rules effectively a lot of the earth outside, not an empire in a sense, not in the way the Romans did, except, but what's called a hegemony, by influence. America gets a lot of things done that once done by influence. And a lot of that has included historically forcing countries to open the door to missionaries. Because that God has shed his grace on thee to carry out the Celtic expansion. Because it's really tied to the expansion of the gospel. So you may or may not have a Celtic ancestry in you, but you have a part to play in expanding the gospel to all the earth. Your part may be to go to the othermost part of the earth, or it may be to support someone who's doing that in prayer. It may be some are sent, we're told in Romans, and some send. Your part may be to send, not to go, but to give money to help a missionary go. But you need this going of the gospel that the Celtic expansion helped carry out. It's not limited just to the Celtic expansion. It's not just limited to Celts. It's not limited to Celtic Jews. It's not limited to Jews. It's limited. It includes all of yous. So until next week, shalom.